Hello, my name is Jessica Klimisch. I'm a creative writer, writing coach, and editor. Something that writers frequently hear is they need a thick skin to handle tough feedback. Specifically, I've heard people say that if you can't handle tough feedback, you're not cut out to be a creative writer. No. Emphatically, no. You don't need thicker skin, you need better feedback. You need a peer, writing coach, or editor who strives to understand you and your work, and who can give you feedback in a more effective way. Feedback should not leave you feeling hardened, misunderstood, or upset. It should leave you feeling motivated and energized. Think for a moment about the worst feedback you've ever received. What did it sound like? What did it feel like? And what did it ultimately help you do or not do? And now think for a moment about the best feedback you've ever received. What did that sound like or feel like? And what did that help you do? Full confession, I have not always given the best feedback to people. I've learned though, and I've changed accordingly over the last few years. It's not that I didn't know what I was talking about, I did, but what you know and what you think means diddly if you can't communicate it effectively. The turning point for me was when I submitted a story to a journal and the journal editor asked if I'd be willing to do some revision on the story. I said, sure. The editor made clear that there was no guarantee of publication, but they sent me some feedback on the story to help guide me in my revising of it. What was unique about the editor's feedback, in which I had never really experienced before up to that point, was the lack of judgment in the questions and comments on my story. There was a kind of neutrality, so I didn't feel defensive about my work in any way. The editor wasn't questioning my stylistic choices. They weren't trying to change my story. They were just trying to help me create what I wanted to create in a more effective way. As a result, I felt encouraged. The editor's questions and comments were deep, grounded in critical thinking. In turn, the questions and comments helped me think critically about my own story and what it is that I was trying to do with it, and why I made certain choices. The whole experience was eye-opening. I had been receiving feedback on creative work for 20 years at that point, including in my MFA program. I'd also been giving feedback for almost 20 years as well on creative work, but I had never received feedback quite like that before. I spent time contemplating the editor's questions and comments, and I ultimately revised the story and resubmitted it, and it was accepted to the journal. Not only that, but it was eventually nominated for an award. In fact, it was the first story I ever had nominated for an award. The experience helped me realize that I wasn't always giving feedback in the most beneficial way, and so I set out to learn more. I read books such as The Anti-Racist Writing Workshop and Craft in the Real World, among others, and I even took an editing class that was focused on how to give feedback to writers. It may sound simplistic, maybe even obvious, but the whole experience was very eye-opening and life-changing for me as both a writer and a writing coach. It made me think of all the times that I had walked away from poems and stories I had written because of the feedback I had received on them. Remember, feedback should not leave you feeling unmotivated, misunderstood, or dejected in any way. It should motivate you and it should energize you. If someone tells you that you need thick skin to receive feedback as a writer, I'll tell you this. That person is probably not very good at giving feedback. So there's a few things to keep in mind if you're the one giving feedback on creative work. First of all, critical thinking. Understanding the why of your opinion without simply repeating platitudes about writing. Keep in mind that the craft of writing is not rule-based. Craft comes out of the analysis of the text at hand, understanding what works and why and how. In my video, Worst Writing Advice, I refer to the arbitrary and flawed rule, which is not a rule, of show, don't tell. Those kinds of rules, like show, don't tell, are flawed because they're not based in craft, or by extension, based in critical thinking. The second thing you need is an awareness of the writer's vulnerability. This awareness can take the form of empathy or sensitivity or striving for neutrality. When someone shares a piece of writing, they're making themselves incredibly vulnerable. So if the person giving feedback says something like, "I don't like this," even if they give a very valid reason for not liking something, what the person receiving the feedback hears is, "I don't like that. I don't like this." That's all they hear. The reason at that point then doesn't even matter. It's pretty impossible to be completely neutral when you're giving feedback, but there are ways of presenting feedback that keeps in mind the vulnerability of the writer. The third thing that you need to provide quality feedback is the ability to listen. What is the writer trying to say? What is often missing in a critique group is the writer's voice. What is their goal with a piece of writing? This means that the person providing feedback needs to ask the right questions, but they also need to listen to the answers. It's often illuminating to me when people giving me feedback ask me certain questions about what I'm trying to do, and I can't answer those questions. I don't know. That means I need to think a little bit more about what my goal is with the piece, so the questions are helpful in that way. Along those same lines, though, if I say, well, I'm trying to do X or Y with this piece, and the person giving feedback dismisses or ignores what I've said, they're also not going to be able to give me very effective feedback. Gone are the days of the silent writer during workshop. That's an outdated method of workshop. It's very important to know what a writer's goal is with a piece. It's important to ask them questions and listen to their answers. The bottom line is that you don't need to be an expert in the craft of writing, and you don't need to know all the terminology to give effective feedback. You just need to be able to think critically and to listen and to consider the writer's vulnerability, because you do need to be able to think and be thoughtful when you're giving effective feedback. And if you're the one receiving the feedback, you don't need a thicker skin. If the feedback feels harsh or upsetting, that's a sign that the person giving the feedback is doing it wrong. It's not you, it's them. As always, if you found this video helpful, I invite you to subscribe, share, comment, or like. Thank you for watching.